Welcome everyone. I am so excited for you to join us on this journey, and this is episode 1 of our series. And in this episode, Mrs S takes us back to over 40 years ago to the genesis and where Morehouse started, some of those stories that inspired what you see today, talking about what Morehouse was founded on, the love, the dignity, the act of resistance against the status quo, and really starting with the roots. I really hope you enjoy the episode, everyone. You're in for a treat.
It's such an exciting thing sometimes to see where we are now, but also to be able to reflect back on the genesis, the evolution of you and of Morehouse. And I know that there is so many different layers and aspects of that, but I wondered if you could speak to us a little bit about kind of what brought you to this place. Where did it start to begin? What were some of the origins?
Yes. I think that the idea of creating some kind of educational care service came from work that I was doing in West Lothian. I had been offered a promoted social work post, and the idea behind that was a new project. And it was about trying to get the education department teachers, headmistresses, headmasters to start to have conversations with social work, and so that there would be a multidisciplinary focus on the needs of children and why children might not be succeeding in education, either not attending school or when they were at school, not necessarily getting the benefit that they could out of their education. So I started that job, and one of the first things that I was asked to do by the director of social work at that time was to go around some of the residential education services that our children were being referred to. And so at that time, there would be probably about 32 organisations in Scotland that offered a range of services, from small children's homes up to residential education. And I visited probably over a period of 2-3 months, I think about 22 different organisations. And I then came back and I was asked to put forward a report to the director, which I did. And I think for me, I struggled with the experience of visiting the establishments that I did visit. Some were small, warm, nurturing environments. And some other organisations I found to be cold and not welcoming, and just a sense that there was a hopelessness in some of the organisations, and a sense that children were there. I got the feeling that children were there because they were bad, rather than that they were there in order for the expertise within the organisation being brought to help these children grow and progress. And so I had a number of conversations with my director as I was preparing the report. And I got myself to a place I was really sad and really felt a bit hopeless at that point in time. And the director, as he was, said, well, you know, if you have that such a strong feeling, why don't you go and do something about it? And I thought that was an outrageous, stupid suggestion. I thought, no way. So over the next kind of few months, I had conversations with him over coffee, and somehow or other, the Bathgate campus, which was our first campus for residential education, it came on the market. And as conversations do go, I ended up inquiring about the Bathgate campus and bought the Bathgate campus without any idea about what I was going to do and how I was going to get enough income to do what I wanted to do. So one of the things that's carried throughout the almost 40 years that I've had and grown the organisations, I've not been strong on business plans. And it's a standing joke at the board meetings. Stephen, my CEO, and I come up with ideas, but we don't necessarily sit down and do a business plan. So my first introduction to the reality of starting Moorhouse was trying to cost what the kind of service would look like. And in my head, I knew that any child that came to Moorhouse needed the opportunity to get the same standard of education as was in the mainstream schools in the local community. So when I costed the service, which was a teacher for every standard grade subject, 40 years ago, I would have needed to charge £5,000 a week. So the reality began to permeate, and my original idea of an 8-bedded service grew to a 32 registered service organisation. So over time, the school, the residential and education part of the school did grow to 32 young people. And it was exciting, but it was also frightening in the early days. And when I look back, I have a mixture of, oh dear, that was rather arrogant. And then the other side, no, I was right. I was right for the time. And I think I was right for the children.
I love that. And it's so powerful, isn't it, that just visiting those spaces kind of something took root and sparked. And I hear what you're saying about the mixed and blended of, I kind of didn't know what I was getting into. But that boldness and courage and drive was quite extraordinary. So I guess I was thinking a couple of bits. The first one was when you'd seen these organisations that maybe felt a little bit not so nurturing or a bit disconnected or cold, what was your initial hope and dream for the kids that you wanted to serve? What did you want them to feel and experience that was different to what you'd seen?
I think that for me was very clear. I wanted children to be in an environment where adults believed in them. I wanted children to be recognised for their potential. And I wanted the adults to provide experiences that helped children grow and feel valued and have their self-esteem grow. Because at that point in time in Scotland, children would end up in residential schools and were recognised and seen as children who couldn't achieve and who more often than not had got themselves into trouble in their communities and in their schools. So for me, I think it was important that I gathered adults that had stickability, resilience, and at that time, love wasn't a word that was around in residential education or in children's homes. And I wanted adults that just had a passion and a love for children. And I believe strongly that if children had that environment round about them, that they would grow, that they would heal, and that they would achieve. And for me, it was important. It was more important who the staff were than their qualifications. And I think that I was very, very fortunate. The people that I attracted, I don't know how, but they seemed to have the same values. And yeah, they helped me get things started.
No, and I love that. And I know we're going to talk about some of a more house person and those beautiful ingredients. Can you a little bit, because I think you've got such a heart. There's a lot of people who have this vision or have this hope, but it doesn't get translated into action. What do you think it was within you that enabled you, and how did you literally go from an idea to making it happen? How did that happen, or what did that look like?
I think obviously I'm recognised it's my personality, in the sense that we have a standing joke in the organisation that I'm addicted to children, and I am from the minute a baby's born into teenage and adolescence. I just get excited, and I get buzz from relationships with children and engaging with children. And I just felt so strongly that what was happening, certainly in Scotland, was so damaging. And I couldn't understand how, because I thought I consider myself an ordinary person. And I couldn't understand how professionals, teachers, social workers, did not understand the importance of relationships. And I couldn't understand how they didn't understand the power of relationships. And so for me, it didn't feel like a choice. It just felt like this had to be done. And if it's important enough, then I need to find the determination to try and create something as an example of what will work in comparison to what I thought wasn't working.
Which is a pretty incredible thing, to have a vision, but as you said, almost it needed to happen, a calling. And I think that's a huge thing and very inspirational for lots of people to hear. So I know that there's a story that people like to call the mini loan story. I wonder if you could sort of share a little bit about that.
I think it goes back to the point I made earlier, no business plan. And so because we were a new organisation, it was inevitable that local authorities were going to test us. And so in the early days, we would have children referred that possibly other organisations had given up on. And so our referral rate and our income came very slowly. And going back to the fact that I needed to pay wages and I needed to pay the bills, there were times where it could be tight. It could be a bit anxious about, the day before the wages were due to be paid. And one of these months, it came to quite a difficult time. And I thought I need to find money to pay the wages. And so I decided to go to the Royal Bank, who was our banking at the time. And I was a bit naughty, and I asked for a loan to buy a Mini for the organisation. And without any question, I got the loan to buy the Mini. needless to say, the Mini was never purchased. The loan managed to pay the wages for the next few weeks. I did obviously in later days share that with the bank manager over coffee, and we laughed quite a bit about me having done that and it being a bit naughty. But he said, and I was surprised to hear, but he actually said that he saw something in what I was saying at the time that was worth taking the risk. And
Wow.
I don't know if he actually believed I was going to buy the Mini, but he forgave me, and our relationship grew stronger over time.
I love that. And I think the creative problem solving and having to survive, but the tenacity and the determination is amazing. And that he saw something in you and your vision and your belief, as did your initial manager, who was like, hey, if you believe so much about this, do this. And there's something so beautiful, isn't there, about having someone be alongside you and believe in you. And I know that that's such a core of Morehouse, of how can we support people to feel kind of supported and held and believed. So that's a beautiful sense. Is there might be things from either people who don't necessarily know your history or journey before this that you wanted to share about what shaped or influenced you to get to where you are, or where you started at the beginning around your professional background or your earliest context, you know?
Yes. Well, given my age, when I was at school, you left school at 15. And so I left school at 15, and I went to work in what was then known as Donaldson School for the Deaf. And I worked in the nursery and primary part of the organisation. And it was my job to be a care assistant for the children. It horrifies me now, but when I think that we would have babies from 3 to 4 years of age residentially in Donaldson's nursery and primary, and they could come from all parts of Scotland and the north of England. When I think about a 3 or 4 year old baby now being away from their parents, but it was the model of the time. And I also look back and think 15 years of age, and someone thought that I had the ability to work with children who without hearing. And we would engage in therapy where we would have vibration therapy, where we would use balls and we would help the babies try and learn and understand vowels and how to try and start using their voice. And when I think at 15, someone thinking I had the ability to do that, it is scary. But I think one of the most important points for me was it was the start of me understanding a value-based care system. Because, I mean, we're going back 65 or more years. And yet, in that organisation, some of the senior staff managed to get over to me a value system where babies and young children were treated with dignity and nurtured and love. And so when I look back, for me, that was the platform that I started my professional journey from, and it's lasted throughout. And I think that it's horrifying to think that we had babies for term time away from their parents, but there were things that were happening there was nurture, there was parenting. And so for me, those elements, I think, have carried all the way through. And it's the language I still use in Moorhouse.
Yeah, and that's, again, it's incredible, isn't it, how those experiences, as you said, there were things that might be shocking or surprising or different, but those core North Star, those principles, those guiding values of dignity and respect and nurturing and love and care have sort of really, that you very much have embodied and continued to carry that golden thread. So I think that's a really beautiful aspect. And of course, there's been layers of different experiences, but that's a really amazing thing to think about, how some of those values started to begin and started to be cultivated, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
So
I then moved on from working in Donaldson's into nursing. And I did my general nurses training. And I was aware that I thought nursing was about caring for people, nursing people when they were vulnerable, and developing an expertise that would make people comfortable and feel safe. And for me, that was the motivation going into nursing. But when I actually arrived, I found it quite different. It was very routine, very structured, and there wasn't much of an opportunity to have a relationship with patients. It was very much, there was a routine, a structure. You did what was required throughout the day, but it was very much a clinical environment. And when you finished those aspects of the job, you then went into the sluice and you cleaned the bedpans. And so for me, I didn't get the satisfaction from general nursing. I didn't get the opportunity to use what I felt I had, which was an ability to establish relationships. And so we were one of the first cohorts in Scotland when I did my training to also have a psychiatric placement. So when I finished and qualified as a general nurse, I thought, I wonder if going into psychiatry, because I believe that was about relationships. And so I thought, I'm going to go into psychiatric nursing. So I then got a promoted post in a psychiatric hospital in Edinburgh. And yes, there was certainly more of an opportunity for establishing relationships. And I felt a satisfaction in contributing to the well-being of the patients and doing a bit more than just being a nurse, trying to use who I felt I was at that time to help build a sense of safety and trust and confidence. And so I then became a charge nurse, and I had my own ward, which I was so proud of. Unfortunately, the hierarchy decided that they would change my ward into a Monday to Friday ECT clinic. So that change for me meant that it was going back to clinical nursing, and it's not where I felt my strengths lay and where I felt I would get the most satisfaction. So what was next? Where would I find what I was looking for? And I had a conversation with one of the social workers in the hospital. And she said, I think you should go and train as a social worker. And it made sense to me at that time. So I thought, that's the next step in my journey. So I then went and did my social work training. And at last, for me, it was about relationships. It was about, if I worked really hard, if I used all my skills, I could make a difference in people's lives. And that journey all made sense to me. And then I became.
And it's a powerful thing, isn't it, when you joined nursing, as you said, and it was a mismatch or incongruent. And it's so interesting because that experience, although it's, I imagine, given a wealth of skills, as you said, it was quite clinical, it wasn't relational. And at your very heart, which I think, is just a galaxy of so much of wanting to be with people over diagnosis or labels, but being relational and helping create that space. And I think it's really interesting that you went in with that relational drive, but didn't quite experience it, and then sort of journeyed. And I think that's a really beautiful combination that maybe people might not know, because there might not be that many people who are nurses and social workers and have those sort of two hands coming together. But that bit of wanting to make a difference, wanting to be relational. So, yeah, really thank you for sort of sharing that bit, because, again, it's another part of your sort of life kaleidoscope and the different threads that you bring within that. So I love that. Are there bits that you feel, if someone was watching this in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, who didn't know you, who didn't know the origins of Moore House, is there anything, I imagine there's lots, but anything that pops in your mind that you're like, really want them to know about where we started or where it sort of all began? Is there anything else that you wanted to add or share with people about that?
I think probably the most important thing for me is the message that anyone, if they have the belief and the passion to make a difference, there is a place for anyone. And I think that I'm not good at recognising the positives of the journey in terms of myself and my contribution. But I think it's important, certainly anyone for me that comes into any caring profession, that they hold on to strong values of dignity, respect, and that it's not just a job. It's such an important element of relationships across all of society. And I think that looking back, if anyone is asking what has been important to me, what continues to be important to me, is love and respect and just giving of oneself to make a difference. And I think that when I speak to new staff in induction, I can give them a hard time because I have to get over to them, this is not a job. This is a profession that requires us to have values, that requires us to have an understanding of who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. And that we get ourselves to a place where we know that it's our responsibility to make a difference in a one-to-one relationship or in an organisation. And for me, I try to get over to staff the importance of the professional parenting role, particularly in the residential side of the work we do. I think that to get them to understand the responsibility that we have to make a difference and to fill the lives of our children and young adults with experiences and memories and a healing journey, and a journey that compensates for any of the challenges that they've had to face that has brought them to be in our organisation. And I think it goes beyond the children. It's about respect for the parents and valuing families. And the thread that needs to go through that is about not being judgmental and recognising that these precious children come from families that were doing the best they could, given what they had to work with. And it's our job as part of a team to make a difference in children's lives. But it's also important that we make a difference in each other's lives as adults. We can't assume that when we get to the stage of being a professional, that we're all fixed and that we don't have problems. We have to recognise as human beings that we're all on a journey and that we can and we should be helping each other in a sensitive way to recognise that when we're bringing ourselves, we can be bringing quite complicated personalities and self into the work that we're doing. And for me, it's about celebrating who we are as human beings and just enjoying the journey, because it's a fantastic journey.
I love that. And you've captured so much, which I know we're going to enrich and expand later, but just that message of being a hopeful disruptor, that message of believing those core values of respect and dignity and love, the honouring of reflection and who we are. But I think it's so important, isn't it, that people don't just realise here we are in the present day. There's been such a journey, such an evolution, such wisdom, lessons learnt, and so many different sort of blocks that have contributed, and that it's an ongoing journey, that there's still so much. So I am so beyond pleased. And when we think about the heart prints that have been left, that you did those visits to all those places and that you said about the mini, and that we are here talking about something that started as a seed but has expanded and is continuing to expand. So I know that you find it tricky to think about your own strengths or skills or journey within that. But I just really want to thank you for everything you are and everything you do, but for sharing a little bit about where it started. I think there's something really inspirational about where it first began and having the courage to begin. So thank you so much. And I'm excited for us to go into some of those other layers.
Thank you.